the classics took of the broad social and historical forces determining the division of the product between wages and profits, and the determination of outputs and accumulation and the way in which they determine output and accumulation made it natural for them to determine these variables separately, which is of course a different matter from independently from prices. With that separation between the determination of the division of the product between wages and profits and of outputs from the determination of prices, the system in no way loses the explanatory or in sense terms predictive meaning. Sufficient to think of Zappa's hint at the determination of the return on capital via a rate of interest fixed by monetary authorities, or, to a less general level, his view that a change in the technical conditions of production for basic products would change all prices and the residual distributed variables, unlike a similar change for a non-basic product. We said that the essential role which we contended of capital, the single magnitude, plays for neoclassical theory, inevitably raises the problem of the Hicksian reformulation of the theory in terms of the Barghesian notion of capitalism. We have returned to our main line up the aside on Professor Sen's consideration, an article which incidentally has some provocative and interesting remarks about the Gramscian origin, the possible Gramscian origin of the influence of Zappa on Wittgenstein's. Now, the quantity of that special factor production, capital, of which we argue the basic importance of neoclassical theory, had to be measured independently of the distribution and relative prices which it was thought to determine, just as the classical quantities of labor and land had to be so measured for determining rent. However, the commodity demanded by the savers clearly is not directly measurable in any such independent terms, independent price and distribution, since its primary expression of savers lay in the value of capital goods. We said capital goods are perfectly substitutable in proportion to their value. So, what the savers take their decision on is value. A basic problem of the new theory, which was emerging from the classical theory, was therefore how to measure capital, the single magnitude, in terms which would be both independent of distribution, as the value of capital goods clearly is not, and at the same time appropriately related to the value quantity on which wealth owners intend to take their decision. The average period of production, by which labor and more generally non-produced factors had to remain invested under each method of production of the commodity and its direct and indirect method of production, was the road along which a conciliation of the two requirements was attempted. As is known, the attempt founded on the necessity to consider compound rate of interest, fixed capital, and plurality of original factors. The impossibility of consistently defining a concept as basis for the intended generalization of classical rent, as we just argued, the quantity of capital was, might conceivably have led to the abandonment of the attempt in favor of some return to classical analysis. However, the principle of factor substitution and the ensuing demand and supply explanation of distribution had apparently taken the roots for them to be abandoned. Thus, the reaction was to apply the principle of substitution to each kind of capital good taken as a distinct factor, with little explicit consideration of the drastic difficulties it would raise of the theory, to which we have mentioned at the beginning, and it is sufficient to remember how little substitutability between factors that would exist if capital were measured in physical terms. Clearly, more capital-intensive method generally imply changes in the kind of capital goods, and not in the physical quantity of the same capital goods. We refer to the Hitsian formulations of the theory. Hitsi's value in capital, in fact, was probably the main influence legitimizing and bringing into mainstream theory the tentative way out of the problem. It was the conception which Barras had advanced. It is perhaps a paradox that Barras foresaw so lucidly the essential unity of capital as the commodity demanded by wealth owners, the substitutability of capital goods, of course not in production, but in the eyes of the wealth owner, who should bring in production the notion of capital as a set of distinct physical factors. That's all it was. It was the conception which Barras had advanced as early as 1877, having initially failed to realize the inconsistency in it and the uniformity of returns on capital goods supply prices, the second element we mentioned at the beginning as being basic for as being requiring the use of capital as a single magnitude at the origin of the classical theory. With the uniformity of returns and incompatibility of Barras's conception of capital as a physical factor, with the uniformity of returns on capital supply prices of what we may call the normal position, which he, like all his predecessors and contemporaries, had originally intended to determine. However, the likely implicit recognition by Hicks of Barras's inconsistency, there are traces clearly of that, meant that he had to accompany the adoption of that conception of capital with the abandonment of the normal position and its uniform rate of profit. But then, the persistency which justified the determination of the equilibrium while abstracting from the changes the latter is undergoing could no longer be assumed, and the analysis had to attempt remedying that by considering the effect of future conditions on the market for commodities and productive services.